The following is brought to you by the Starfleet Podcast Network, SPN, The Spin. They keep talking about snowstorms coming in, and it's one of those things, it's like, I'm not ready for it. Every year it's the same thing because people are going to drive stupid like they do, and it's just going to be slow on the roadways.
Red alert.
This is BigJ with Beyond Trek Podcast. I'm here with my guest, Chris Goodmakers, and I see here on your Facebook profile that you are a power contributor with Screen Rant.
I'm a regular video producer with the channel Screen Rant. You'll see my videos uploaded daily on screenrant.com, plus some past videos I've done on their main channel.
So how long have you been doing this with Screen Rant?
I've worked for them for about almost 3 years now, 2 to 3 years. I started when I was fresh out of college and couldn't really find a job anywhere else, and they were nice enough to give me work. And then I found, quite a bit of success there. And I've been enjoying it more or less for the last couple of years and providing them with a lot of coverage on stuff ranging from Star Trek, Star Trek videos, onto the latest series. Right now I'm covering Reacher as it's coming out, which has been a lot of fun. I've been enjoying that season pretty much. I'm always ready to do a Godzilla video too. I love the big lizard.
You mentioned Reacher. I just got finished watching season 2 the other day, and that show is just unbelievable. Mm-hmm. I really like Reacher. That guy, to tell you what, if Reacher is walking up to you, just apologize. You don't know what for, just say, I'm sorry.
It does the sort of male power fantasy thing really well, in the sense that, Alan Ritchson is very likable as Jack Reacher. And it's sort of just like, I just love seeing people try to kill Reacher and then he just kills them right back. And then he's like, you send more guys for me to kill.
Well, and I mean, look at how strong the guy is. It's like ungodly.
Yeah.
He could go 4-on-1, 5-on-1 easy, no problem. Yeah. That guy's a beast. And there's a lot of talk. Well, it's fans really want this to happen, but I really think that he should be Batman in the upcoming Batman Brave and the Bold for this new DC. Is it DCEU or DCU? The one that they're
DCU now. The whole James Gunn thing. He's abandoning the DCEU. We're dropping the E. It's just DCU. It's simpler now.
Yeah. So I think that he should play Batman. I mean, my God.
I could see it. He has he not only, like, if you're familiar at all with his sort of past career, he's had a lot of bit parts here and there. His biggest part before Jack Reacher was a show called Blue Mountain State, where he was the jock football captain guy. Mm-hmm. And it was a very comedic role. He was very funny. He's also had like a part on Brooklyn Nine-Nine where there was a joke where he played past version of Scully, the really slovenly guy from the modern times. Uh-huh. So like they cut back and you're like, he's this big beefcake, and you're like, what happened? He's really good. I think he has a lot of charisma, and he's very funny, and I could see him playing Batman. And certainly, it would be nice to see a Batman who was maybe a little bit lighter this time around.
I think it would too. You also mentioned recently Godzilla. Have you seen Godzilla -1? I have not.
Oh yeah, I absolutely got a ticket to the theater as soon as it came out locally, and I think it was probably the best film I've seen in 2023. Certainly the most rousing and impactful film I've seen in 2023.
Really? I've heard nothing but good things about it. It's like, wow, I really need to get on the ball and see this.
Oh, it's very good. It's well, I took my girlfriend and writing partner Tamara with me, and she had never really seen a Godzilla film. I think the only thing she'd really seen was the 2014 one, and then I showed her Godzilla versus Kong when it came out. Mm-hmm. It's like the American ones. I was like, no, you got to see the Japanese ones. That's the ones I always get excited for. I was super excited for Shin Godzilla. And walking out of the theater, she looks at me and says, okay, I feel like I have a problem now, because I understand why you love Godzilla so much, but I feel like I've now seen the best Godzilla, and anything you could show me is instantly going to be like a step down, either in special effects or in story or in sort of emotional core or themes or ideas.
You messed up. You set the bar too high.
It's kind of a hard place to start now, as we've started with the best one, and or at least certainly the most like modern and impactful one, you know?
Right. Do you have a favorite topic that you like doing for Screen Rant, whether it be Star Trek or DC, any other property? Is there one that you just have a preference over?
Yeah. It really depends on like sort of how I approach it. I always love Star Trek topics. So anytime I see those come up or have an idea to pitch for one, I'm always very excited about it. I'm very excited to talk about, and they let me, like, these days are letting me talk a lot about sort of the minutia of the production history of Star Trek, which is really fun. Talking about various actors and actresses that have taken on multiple roles. Unfortunately, this year we lost the actress who played the Borg Queen in the second season of Picard, but she had also played the love interest that Jadzia Dax, the famous lesbian kiss. So I got to do a video about that, and it was, it was nice to talk about somebody who didn't really have like, this huge grand role in Star Trek, but who definitely made an impact. As for the other side of it, one of the things I ironically love talking about, and I sort of jump on any time that comes up, is the Transformers franchise, especially with regards to sort of the new movies, the Michael Bay movies and stuff. I did this huge video, which you can find on the channel from, maybe a half year ago, that was sort of breaking down the Transformers timeline. And it's just so ripe for comedy, that universe, and sort of the filmmaking decisions, and sort of the kind of like weird ideas that really end up at play in those films. So I find them endlessly creative as movies, and it certainly makes me more creative to talk about them. So I always enjoy a good Transformers video for the yucks.
The problem that I've always had with the Michael Bay Transformers is that there's a lot of times I don't know who I'm looking at in regards to the characters, because one, they're zoomed up so close to them that you can't really see. And I know that there are ones that are certainly distinct, that you know who they are, but in general, it's something about it. It's just, they're hard to differentiate.
I often make the joke that it took them 6 films to figure out what a Transformer looks like, because sort of at the start of Bumblebee, they now resemble what they should have looked like, in the G1 sort of era. But yeah, no, you're right. It's the visual mess of it all. It's the sort of way that Bay just like throws everything out all at once, to the point where it's like a visual auditory explosion that's just overwhelming. It's akin to having like an autistic meltdown. It's just like too much all the time. Stop. And it's just the audacious way he loves to completely contradict the continuity of not only the last film, but even the last scene.
He does.
And I always find that, just endlessly fascinating. And I'm maybe a bit of a masochist and just routinely subjecting myself to those films over and over again so I can edit videos out of them.
I think that's what we want, is we want the G1 look. And I'm glad that we finally got that with Bumblebee. And because I'm a big fan of Transformers, the movie. That's one of those movies that I could watch pretty much any day. And it doesn't get old. And the Star Trek connection there is Leonard Nimoy played the voice of Galvatron in Transformers the movie, which I think that it would have been nice if they'd had.
So I was going to say there's a further Leonard Nimoy connection to the Transformers universe.
Yep.
You're right. He did play Galvatron in the 80s movie. And there's some talk about how he may have finished a few of Orson Welles' lines, because Orson Welles was either sick or just not interested in returning to the recording studio. But he was also in Transformers 3, The Dark of the Moon. It takes me a minute to remember these really stupid subtitles. Where he I like to joke that, it's storied actor Leonard Nimoy playing a fire truck.
Sentinel Prime.
Yeah, but that's because I believe he is actually, his sister is married to Michael Bay. from my understanding, Michael Bay is married to Leonard Nimoy's sister, and Michael Bay and Leonard Nimoy are actually were brother-in-laws.
I knew there was a connection, and I'm sure you're right. I'd have to look it up, but I thought there was a cousin involved in there somewhere. Like it was.
I'm pretty sure it was something involving his sister. But yeah, it is like he has this sort of weird intermingling with the Transformers universe. Nimoy did, and he was such a wonderful actor too. Yes,
he was. Now, when it comes to Star Trek. And this is how I came across you and how we met. Saw a post that you had in regards to this animated film you're doing called Star Trek Tigris. And yes. I think that's something that is very unique because we haven't gotten a whole lot of animated Trek until over the last 5 years or so. Sure, we had the animated series, but now we have Lower Decks and had Prodigy, which Prodigy's returning. Now, when you get into fan films, I think that's certainly new. If I'm not mistaken, at least from what I've seen, that this is the first animated Star Trek fan film that would be done, that you're doing.
Yeah, well, it's certainly an evolving project. Basically, if you want me to sort of explain a little bit about what it is, we're looking at it more of like a series at this point too, but we are starting with just sort of like a pilot or an initial project. And it basically came about because my partner and I started writing these Star Trek scripts for NaNoWriMo last year, which is the National Novel Writing Month, which is, she's a big writer and it's something she tries to do every year. And this year, or last year, I should say, we had decided, let's, commit to a Star Trek series and kind of come up with what our ideal Star Trek crew and cast would be, and sort of kind of adventures we would want to see them have, which I'm sure every Star Trek fan has done at some point or another. But yeah, we're currently casting. We have about 90% of the cast selected, which is some wonderfully talented voice actors. We're working with some people with connections to major Hollywood productions, some people that are just really enthusiastic and in love with both the project and the characters they're going to play. To kind of talk a bit about what it is, it's called Star Trek Tigris. It follows the ship, the USS Tigris, in the early 25th century, sort of the late period of the first decade, so between 2406 and 2410. And it's about a captain who is a woman in her 50s who is a Trill. And sort of one of the things we wanted to really look at was Trill society and sort of some of the problems that we were seeing brought up in DS9 that could lead to things like, this weird nepotism and classism amongst symbiotes and people with symbiotes and non-joined Trills. And our main character is named Sosa Triex. Triex is the symbiote she has inside of her, and it's a little bit of a different flip on the traditional, where you would have a symbiote who's lived multiple lifetimes in a young person, a la Jadzia Dax. This flips it on its head, where Sosa is a 50-year-old woman who is a mother of 3, and she, our kids are out of the house. She's a divorcee, so, that part of her life has ended, and she's found herself at sort of this new period in her life. And in the canon, we sort of try to establish Trills Trill symbiotes that join in their first lifetime. They join with older hosts. That way they have more of an established life. They have somebody that's more of able to sort of guide them through their first life, someone who has that maturity. And Sosra joins with the Triex symbiote, which is a very young symbiote. So now she has this feeling of, even though she's an experienced officer, even though she has, a long career in Starfleet, everything feels new to her. It feels like she's young again. It feels like she's experiencing going to warp for the first time, or, getting into these situations. And it's also a process of her sort of rediscovering herself. And that's, that's something that translates to the supporting cast and the supporting characters as well, because one of the themes we really wanted to focus on was the idea that You have these people who are part of what has traditionally been a monoculture in Starfleet, Klingons, Ferengi, Vulcans, but they don't fit into that monoculture. They're different. They, excuse me, they have something about them, either their history, their personality, that sort of, makes them clash against what people view as sort of the traditional role for their culture.
What made you decide on using a Trill as your main character? And I'm sure you could ask this question on any race that you might have picked as the captain, but tell me what your thought was on using a Trill.
Yeah, well, it basically came from watching DS9. My partner, Tamara, who has written a lot of these scripts and is just a wonderfully, wonderfully talented writer. She basically wasn't really a big Star Trek fan until she met me, and then I got her into it, and we've been going through all the series and everything.
So she's been indoctrinated.
But once we basically hit DS9, which is where she really fell in love with the writing of the series. It was all the Dax stuff that just kept bringing up all these questions, where she was like, okay, now we're finding out that not only has Dax's previous host, Curzon, been on the Trill Symbiote Council, her first host was literally the head of the Symbiosis Commission. That sort of, doesn't that raise questions about sort of the nepotism that can be inherent in passing these symbiotes down the line? And then there's the whole can of worms in the episode where you discover that like 50% of the population is actually secretly compatible, and how that could cause all sorts of issues. So it basically came as the idea of our captain and our villain. So our captain, of course, is Sosra, who is an older woman with a younger symbiote in it. And our villain is this character named Ren. And Ren is a symbiote who has lived for multiple lifetimes and sort of experienced the trauma and sort of the iron will of the Symbiosis Commission in terms of controlling his life, that it's made him become widely militant about sort of a symbiote first mentality. And this has made Ren into a being that more so hijacks hosts rather than actually blending properly with the hosts. Sort of a callback to when the Trill first showed up in TNG, as well as like the Gould from SG-1.
Right.
But it's so that he's a character that sort of burns through these hosts and doesn't see these hosts as having any value, where Sosra and Triex, they have such a strong bond together and they become such a united and joined pair that it sort of serves as a foil. They serve as a foil to each other. So basically, we wanted to get into having a Trill captain because we wanted to explore these questions about Trill society. Sosra, as well, as a character who is someone who could have benefited from nepotism because her mother was a very important figure and her mother was a joined Trill with a very important symbiote. But she wanted to push all that away and just kind of earn stuff on her own merits. And we wanted to sort of explore those themes of like how this society could breed something that is sort of corrupt, but corrupt in the sense that it's, something that everybody just kind of takes for granted because it's the way it's always been. And you need this catalyst of Ren showing up to sort of throw a wrench into it. And that makes Sosra start to sort of question these things about her society and, how she got this position, because that's another thing is at the start of the series, she's a first officer, or at the start of the episode, rather, she's a first officer. And then she gets this very sudden promotion to being a captain only, after basically just healing from being joined. So she's being thrown into a new position. She's being thrown into a new crew that she doesn't really know, with a new first officer that she's just meeting in Senec, who is another very interesting character that we've had a lot of, attention towards. And she's having to deal with all this. She's having to deal with all these problems while going on a new mission in a ship that she's unfamiliar with, and sort of both having to figure herself out and figure her surroundings out at the same time.
If I recall correctly, I know there's one new race in there. Are there two new races that are in this fan film? I know one guy's like a tree.
Yeah, we have one primarily new race called the Vec.
Yep.
With its main character, with the main character Volek, and Volek, yeah, they are a plant people, which is something that's been lightly alluded to in Star Trek before, with some offhand conversations about certain people in DS9. I think there was talk about a crew member budding at one point in DS9, but we really wanted to, have we're doing a fan film, so why not put your own new race, put your own new stamp in the Star Trek universe? I mean, what are we doing here? We gotta, you gotta inject some of your own self into it.
It gets old doing Vulcans and Andorians all the time, things like that.
Yeah, we wanted to do different things we hadn't seen before in sort of traditional Star Trek. And Volek is a plant person. They're from a planet. They're non-binary, and they are from a planet that initially was basically this big living world with this intertwined root system, sort of like Pandora from the Avatar universe.
Thinking that.
But like there's no animal life on it. It's all just plants and pollinators. And the planet lived as sort of this big hive mind. And then for whatever reason, they started to send out individuals, beings that were once rooted trees were grown down into sort of human-shaped beings that were then sent out to explore the universe. Volek was one of them. Volek joined Starfleet and became the security officer for the Tigris. And one of the things about the Tigris is it also is sort of a bit of a ship of misfits. It's sort of a bit of a ship where Starfleet has put people that they're not really quite sure about. Like, there's nothing in their records that says they're bad, but maybe there's something that's different about them. In Volek's case, the Federation is still very wary of hive minds because of the Borg and to a lesser degree, the Founders. The idea of having a being that was part of a hive mind and, potentially could go back and take all they've learned to that hive mind. They both want to keep a close eye on them, but they don't want to piss them off, and they don't want and they don't want to offend what could be a potential ally. The Vec planet is in the Gamma Quadrant as well, too, which is another, reason that Starfleet is very keen to keep Volek on their good side because, post-Dominion War into the 25th century, and this was even established in Lower Decks and a bit of Picard, the Federation is still trying to get its foot into the Gamma Quadrant in sort of a more stable way, which is something that we want to explore as well as sort of the stories roll on. You're going to see a lot of the Tigris taking missions in the Gamma Quadrant. Mm-hmm. So, and we have some new races and ideas for Gamma Quadrant species that you haven't seen before that are very exciting and interesting, but I don't want to, that's all future plans. I'm still trying to focus on the today of it all. Yeah, but that's Volek. Volek as a character is very strong, is very confident, but also they are definitely the one who is sort of the traditional, I'm learning about everything as I go. I'm learning about these different societies. So, they're kind of the person that you can bounce all that traditional exposition dialogue off of. Why are they like this? Why is this race like that, kind of thing? And Volek can ask questions because, again, they're coming from a very different place than your, more traditional individual humanoids, meat people, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What made you decide that you wanted to do an animated film as opposed to getting live action?
Well, it's a number of things. One of the big things is money, of course. The idea. I'm doing this all sort of on the goodwill of fans and on my own reputation right now until I can, build a bit of a budget for it. We initially started out with the idea of an audio drama, just a sort of straightforward audio drama, which is when I began talking to different voice actors and casting different voice actors and hearing their work and reading back our lines and kind of falling in love with their interpretations of the characters. And then we ran into the problem where we wrote this series initially as something much more visual. We wrote it as kind of just a pie in the sky. If this was our great Star Trek series, this is how we would want to do it, kind of thing. So there are visual elements, and I'm also a very visual person too. I have degrees in video production and digital photography, and I work in editing and animation and light animation myself. So I had the idea, let's kind of like half and half it, basically, where we do voice actors and sort of like record their lines, but then I get some animation done, some sort of motion comics and background work done, which is all stuff I'm currently trying to source, of course, and figure out sort of budgeting on that. But yeah, it was just mainly born from the idea that we had all these really great visual moments in our head, and we had all these great ideas for how we would represent this and that, and we wrote a couple episodes too that are very based on things like color. The second episode we wrote is about a star that is pink, and it's very important to the plot that the star is pink because it involves I don't want to spoil too much about it, but it involves sort of a chemical that's gotten into the star that's causing problems. So a lot of that was really, really born from, I don't want to go back and sort of chop out all the stuff that I had in my head visually to try to fit it to an audio drama. So that's why, we kind of settled on, well, let's try to do something in animation, even if it's just sort of a light kind of motion graphics animation. I think I can bring a lot of visual flair to it.
And would you be primarily doing the animation work, or is that something that you're going to have a team doing? So is animation part of what you do?
It's going to be collaborative, basically, the way I'm going to, or the way I'm planning on doing it, and I'm working out with a couple other people right now to sort of figure out the production on it, is I'm going to have proper artists do up backgrounds, and then probably another artist do up character animations with different facial expressions, different sort of poses and stances, and then I know how to do the sort of keyframing and animation tracking in things like Premiere and After Effects and Illustrator. So it's going to be sort of animated in that. If you've ever seen sort of a like a visual novel, it's going to be like that, but a little bit more motion and animation. And hopefully the more we get going on it, and the more interest I'm able to raise in the project, the more talented people we can bring on board, and try to always improve. Basically, that's going to be the name of the game. Is I want every step to be better than the last, so that we end up with something that we're all really proud of. And I think we're already well on our way, especially with the cast we were putting together.
Is there any involvement that Screen Rant has in this, or is this completely a side project for you?
Oh, this is very much a side project for myself currently. Screen Rant is very much my day job. They are wonderful in providing me lots of opportunity to talk about all sorts of pop culture minutia. But this is sort of my sanity project a bit. This is what I'm doing on the side in order to, have something different to work on, have something that isn't sort of just the same grind every day. This is also something that I just have a lot of passion about, because I've read these stories that Tamara has written, and they are, quite honestly, and I know I'm a little biased, but they are some of the best Star Trek stories I have ever read. I'm quite proud, especially of the third episode, which she wrote all herself, called Culture Clash, which focuses on the sort of theme of the new changes to culture clashing with the old, sort of dogma, and that revolves around our main character, Senec, who is a Vulcan who was raised by two Beta Z mothers because his biological parents died in the Dominion invasion of Beta Z. They were stationed there they were scientists who were stationed there, and they had a relationship with two Beta Z women, and then they were killed in the Dominion invasion, which is something that's talked about lightly in the later stages of DS9. And Senec was raised on Beta Z, and as a result, he did not follow the way of logic. He certainly tried to, and they certainly tried to, but it just didn't work for him. And because he had, this support network, and especially on a planet with a lot of very strong telepaths, he was able to sort of overcome his emotions and integrate them into himself, And as a result, he is an emotional Vulcan. He's something more akin to like Cybok. And that causes no end of conflict with traditional Vulcans. And that's what Culture Clash ends up being about, is this young Vulcan ensign who feels like he can't work under a first officer who is an emotional Vulcan, and they have to both butt heads and then figure out why that problem exists and how they can move forward and solve that problem. And that's a lot of who Senec is as a character, and a lot of the kind of the sort of conflict that will be thrown at him over the course of the story.
I think it's nice that you took a one-liner from DS9 about the fall of Beta Z and used that as your foundation for a character. Mm-hmm. I think I wish DS9 would have. I was about to say, I wish they would have done a little more with that, but I think that was just the whole point, was the shock value of, oh my God, one of the main Federation worlds has fallen to the Dominion.
Yeah. And it's like a bait and switch too in that episode too, because you think the Dominion's going to attack. I don't even remember at this point, but like another planet, and then at the end it ends up being Beta Z, and it's always something that intrigued me, because I always thought about this, sort of idyllic, beautiful planet that's suddenly just invaded by Jem'Hadar, and we actually have an idea for like a flashback episode that kind of covers that, and but yeah, no, that's always, I always thought that would have been, if you were going to have an emotional Vulcan, and you were going to have an emotional Vulcan who was in Starfleet and who was able to rise to the rank of first officer, that would probably be like one of the best backstories for him. And especially like what kind of race would be best equipped to help a young emotional Vulcan. And I think Beta Zeds would be tremendously equipped. And side note, because of that, and because of something that is very much established in Star Trek V, which is that emotional Vulcans tend to have much stronger psychic powers, Senec actually does have a more developed telepathic power than your average Vulcan.
Well, that's going to make for some interesting storytelling. I need to remind myself, I need to send you, there's actually this like audio drama that I did that was based on the fall of Beta Z. So I've got to send you that audio file, see what you think of that. Yeah, it was. This was a while back. It was something that I wrote, had a couple people do the voices of, edited together, and it was the same thing. It was just this short thing based off of that one line in the episode. So yeah, pulled something from there. Do you think that it's easier, or what's easier to do? Writing a character that is already from an established species, like the Vulcans or the Trill, or one that's new, like the, I'll call him the plant guy.
The Vec, yeah.
The Vec, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting, because when you're writing sort of an established race or an established character, there's a lot of, going back through what has already been sort of canon established. And a lot of times that's just like the weirdest offhand dialogue. One of the biggest problems we ran into was we have a main character named Baxor Laszlo, who is a Bolian man. He's the chief engineer. And going back through and trying to figure out what is canon about Bolians has been one of the hardest things possible. Yeah. Because you go back and you're like, okay, so what has been talked about on as far as like what Bolians are and sort of what their culture is? Well, everybody says that they're always, the happiest race or the most easygoing race, but really is that just because of Mott? Other Bolians don't necessarily follow that line.
Well, the one that was on Voyager, that was part of the Maquis, he seemed pretty jovial.
Chell? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, like, as far as like that, so okay, that's a little light canon. The biggest thing we can find is both about their food and their polyamory. Their food is, fermented, and they have calcified tongues or like encased tongues, so their food is quite pungent and strong, and we have endless comedy about that. And the other thing is their polyamory, which is a big thing that we've included with Baxor, because they mentioned several times in the series, or at least a couple of times in the series, that Bolians take multiple wives, multiple husbands. So Baxor is a sort of traditional family man character who has both a husband and a wife and 7 kids.
So very much like the Denobulans.
Yeah, like the Denobulans, exactly. And yeah, so that was something we wanted to sort of explore, was, a traditional family unit in a polyamorous relationship. But yeah, writing Bolians has been, I think, one of the hardest things, because just trying to figure out, like, as far as like what is canon about them for a race that has appeared quite a bit throughout Star Trek. There's very little established about them in terms of their history, even what their planet looks like. They have some cliffs that we know about, because there's a joke about director Cliff Bowl,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, that's been hard. Writing stuff about, new species, the Vec, you can just kind of go wild on that. You can come up with your concept, you can think about it. And we try not to tease out too much, about Volek's origin. But then you kind of just end up doing that, because you're like, well, I don't want to address that right now. I don't want to talk about that. And then you get to, episode 8 or whatever that you've written, and you're like, okay, I guess now I finally have to talk about, this original race and sort of what they're like. But it also is good to have in your back pocket, as because you can create sort of surprises out of nowhere. Volek can suddenly pull this ability out of their butt if they need to, So yeah, I think as far as like trying to write canon alien races, the hardest part is the ones where there's just enough information to be dangerous, but not enough to really give you a good direction on where you should go all the time. So you kind of have to, fill in the blanks.
I'm imagining Volek, either as like looking like Swamp Thing, or the tree guys from Lord of the Rings, or Groot. Do you have that picture in your head as to what the Vec look like?
Yeah, well, one of the cool things about the Vec, and one of the things that we've sort of talked about back and forth, Tamara and I, is what kind of Vec you look like is very much based on what kind of plant you were, or what kind of a being you were when you were on the planet Vec. You later meet a character who was part of Volek's ecosystem when Volek was initially this big tree. The character was the collection of fungus that provided nutrients to Volek's root system, and then they both basically morphed into humanoid beings. And of course, the being that's based off of the fungus is much less strong, much less durable, but much harder to like poison and that kind of thing. Whereas Volek has I would liken Volek more to less like Groot and more to like if you've ever seen Eccleston's run as Doctor Who, I think in the second episode there are some tree people in that, and that's sort of how I picture Volek. But overall, Volek's going to be more human looking than plant looking. Again, I'm going to be trying to work with some artists to figure out where we're going to go with that. One of the features that Volek has that we describe in several episodes that's going to be visually pleasing is Volek has like a crown of leaves that they can expand behind their head. And they are very dependent on sunlight because they are a photosynthesizing being. So when they're first introduced in the very first episode, the door opens to their quarters and it's just a blinding light because their entire quarters is basically set up like it's the surface of the sun. And, Volek can run into trouble if they're in darkness for too long. And that's why they sort of need the leaves to absorb light as a source of nourishment.
How many episodes do you have this planned out as? Because it sounds like is going to be a multi-part series.
Yeah, like I said, right now we're focusing on, it's sort of stepped. Right now I'm focusing on getting the pilot done and sort of figuring out the process and is sort of getting the workflow done. And then once that workflow is established, and once I have my actors going and I've got my assets and my basically my ability to make it, then I'm going to focus on an initial 10 episode batch, including that first run. And then hopefully if we can get a full season out of this, which I would love to, that's going to be about 20 episodes or so. But that's all like, that's my dream essentially. My ultimate dream would be to make this into like a full 7-season huge series, but I don't know. That's all just hopes and wishes right now. Right now I'm focusing on the initial pilot, which is going to revolve around Sosra becoming captain of the USS Tigris, getting integrated into her crew, and then having to deal with this rogue Trill terrorist who is threatening a peace between two warring peoples. That's the first episode is going to very much deal with the secrets that Trill society holds about its compatibility. One of the things that Ren has a league of people who are disenfranchised former Trill initiates, people that tried to get symbiotes and then were cut for whatever reason. These people don't just go away, and they become angry, they become disillusioned, they start to internalize that failure too and think, oh, am I really not the one who is worthy? Am I not the one, symbiotes must be so important that maybe I should devote everything, including my life, to doing whatever they say is important to do. And that's something I think DS9 established even before us in the episode where Dax is training a young initiate, and he's very much internalizing this absolutely brutal process of selection. So the first episode is called Clear Skies, and it's going to essentially focus on that aspect of Trill society, as well as our main character Sosra and sort of her adjusting into this new role in her life.
You said that the series takes place in the Gamma Quadrant. Is that some of it or all of it? And also, a follow-up question to that is, how do you do a series based in the Gamma Quadrant but not retread with the Dominion? Because that they're there, but you kind of, is it one of those things where it's like, yeah, we know they're there, but we don't want to go there because that story with Dominion involvement, that's kind of been told.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. We're very Dominion light in terms of what we talk about. And, that's very much for a very specific reason. We don't want to just become DS9 fan fiction. We don't want to become just sort of a retread of all these DS9 plot lines, even though we are bringing in the Trill and to a lesser extent, the Ferengi. So one of the ways we've gotten around that, and to answer your first question, no, it's not all set in the Gamma Quadrant. In fact, that's more of an aspect we're going to be bringing in a little later. Initially, it's set more in and around Trill and this specific planet called Klinos 1, where this war is raging between the people on the surface and their moon colony. But one of the neat things that, and we've sort of tooled with this idea, is what if there are species in the Gamma Quadrant that were able to, for whatever reason, resist Dominion control? One species in particular, called the Mzatnor, that Tamara has absolutely fallen in love with as a concept, is a species that was so hardcore that even the Jem'Hadar were like, maybe we shouldn't.
Oh, really?
But but the thing about them is they're extremely isolationist. They basically had their bubble in the Gamma Quadrant. They're sort of, to use a Game of Thrones analogy, they're sort of the Dorne of the Gamma Quadrant, where essentially it was like, you guys can just, as long as we're in this steady stalemate, we'll just kind of leave things as we are. And now that the Dominion is gone, or as gone as it was before, definitely not as big of a presence, there is this power vacuum, and that involves other species sort of trying to vie for being on top, species that were once, under, and we've created a couple other species too here and there. These are all sort of like plot lines that I'm not even sure if we're going to get to in season one. Season one is mostly going to focus on the main characters and sort of, the trials and problems they have in their backstories and how that affects them. And And we have our pie in the sky ideas. We even have ideas about bringing in a Q here or there, but for the most part, I think the Gamma Quadrant stuff is going to be, I wouldn't say minimal, but I would say like not as wrapped up in the continuity of the Dominion War as you would think. It's more episodic.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah. Has there been anything that was very challenging, almost challenging enough that made you ask, okay, I wasn't planning on this, wasn't thinking about this, and why have I gotten into doing this film? Because this is a big buzzsaw. Have you walked into any of those yet?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think the big thing that's always looming over my head is the copyright of it all. Of course, that looms over every fan production's head, and I don't want to, turn it into something that's just gonna, I don't want to try to make money off of something that someone else's IP. This is definitely not about that. This is about my passion in trying to bring this story so that other people can experience it too. But yeah, just the idea of copyright hanging over my head, and that anytime I could get that letter where I would have to retool something or but until that happens, all I can do is get caught trying and just try to, make something that I want to make until someone tells me that I can. And then I'm going to say, well, too bad, I'm going to make it anyway. But yeah,
CBS is going to send the Gestapo to get you if you do that.
Yeah. But the biggest thing has just been like figuring it all out. This is my first time trying to do a production like this. I have a, experience in sort of all the aspects of it. I've done video editing for years. I've done video production. I've, done organization and sort of project management. And this is just putting all of that together. And, that's, of course, always been a challenge, figuring things out here and there. But so far, everybody I've met have been so helpful and so open, and the Star Trek community is so welcoming. Just the people I've met that have had connections to other people that have had connections to other people. You were, so wonderful to let me come on this podcast and just ramble about my fan series.
Absolutely.
And I think that just that sort of welcomingness of this idea has been the biggest motivator, and it's been the biggest thing that's kept me and Tamara going, is just putting ourselves out there and putting out this story that we have a passion for, and then seeing the response to it be fairly positive has just been really heartening.
When I first got into doing the fan film stuff, there was it was something that it hadn't occurred to me to really get into covering until I was approached by a person's named Samuel Cockings, who's the big VFX artist in the fan film community. He sent an email to our email account and talked about doing something like some kind of interview on the podcast. And of course I was like, sure, because it's not often that someone will ask to be on the podcast. And to me, I think that's a good thing when you meet people that are like, yeah, I would like to be on if you're looking for someone to talk to. And as I talked with him and then started going through some of the fan film communities, I wanted to find people that I could just talk to and get to know. And I noticed that on my Facebook, it was kind of lean on Star Trek fans, at least in my opinion. You know how it is. It's everyone you went to high school with and past coworkers. So I wanted to expand that and get to meet and network with more people that were in and around and involved with Star Trek. And I just kind of went into this rabbit hole of the fan film community and thought, I'm going to talk to a couple people here. And before you know it, I started talking to them more, getting to know these individuals. And it really seemed like this is the way to go, because I haven't seen any other podcast that does coverage on fan films like I've been doing. And it seemed like, okay, well, this is an untapped a thing here that I think more people should know about. And for me, it was kind of like a no-brainer that, yeah, I definitely want to be in this more. And there have been some great people that I've met there, and I'm sure you have as well. And it's been a good time in the community and getting into these things more. There's in the near to mid future, there's going to be a fan film that I'm going to be in. Not yet a huge part, but I've created a character that I'm going to be, like anytime you see me, I'm going to be that character, which is also one of those things that, because I've talked about and said, I think you only have one good chance to have a character that you play in a film to establish that this is who that person is in everything they do. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about and setting up, okay, well, who would I do? Who's someone that is a new character and that's not directly part of the Star Trek franchise, because then you have some more room to work with and more to create and to do something with. And so when I saw your post, it was, I said, this is great, because animated fan film is not something that is very common yet. And you may be the only one who does it, or whoever does it. So that's going to be something that will definitely set you apart from the others. There are some great fan productions out there for sure. And I think an animated one is definitely going to catch some interest there, for
fan
sure.
Productions have always given me inspiration, right back to the days of Sandy Cholera and Batman Dead End or Star Trek Continues. I used to watch that like crazy every time it came out with a new episode, and you were getting decay on that show. And Star Trek Renegades came out, directed by Tim Russ, and like that's it's long storied history of these fan productions that are just both so well done and so, interesting and inventive and creative. And the thing you were talking about with new characters is a lot of why we wanted to, do something like this, and why I think that there's already been, even with the sort of ephemeral state of it, there's already been like a huge response to what I've talked about with Star Trek Tigris, because it's full of things that people are hungry for. We have a cast member who is a character who is a female Ferengi pilot, who sort of is exploring the continued threads of female Ferengi emancipation. We have a sort of Zen Klingon character who is dishonored or discommendated, but because her father actually was a traitor, as opposed to Worf, who sort of had, and she also explores something that was only lightly hinted at in DS9, which is how actual discommendated Klingons would have had to live on Kronos, which is essentially as vagrants and castaways. We have a communication officer who is an autistic woman who, autism and sort of those neurodivergencies is something we've never really seen properly portrayed in Star Trek, or at least even discussed about, like what, somebody with a neurodivergency, what their place is in Federation society. And, we talk about how it's basically accommodations are so built into everything, they're ubiquitous now. And things that, people don't have today are just granted in the Star Trek universe. And that's part of what makes it a utopian, part of what makes everybody able to sort of rise to their best, because they don't have those same challenges that we have today. We have a Native American female doctor, because Native American portrayals in Star Trek have never been the greatest, and we want to sort of rectify that. We have a wonderful Native American actress who's going to be playing her. So this has all been very important to us, and sort of the idea of new characters, new ideas, new things that break the mold of, what we've already seen before. We don't want to just do another story about Kirk and Spock, because as much as I'm enjoying Strange New Worlds, and as much as I'm enjoying the new Trek, it is all still very much tied to the canon and characters of old. There's not really a new TNG, or there's not really a new DS9 where it's just, here's a whole new cast with whole new stories ready to go. Nobody is anybody's son,
Right. No one's anyone's son or someone's brother that was never mentioned or anything like that. And what I wanted to tell you is that with your character that's going to be the doctor, the Native American, if you have any consultant on Native American character, please make sure that that person is Native American before you have them.
I'm not Chakotaying this.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Yeah. I can't remember the guy's name, but that just
that is one of the most insane stories in Star Trek, and I constantly bring that up. Yes. And what's more insane was that guy was actually already outed by a news program before he was even hired to Voyager. But yeah, we're not doing that. We're not doing I think one of the questions that was asked when we talked about her name is Amber Galahai, Dr. Amber Galahai. When we talked about her, one of the questions from I forget who, but it was basically, is she from Earth, or is she from that planet that was established in TNG and the Cardassian? And I was like, I am not touching that. That can stay over here. She's from Earth.
When you have to watch that, because if you do something to break or stretch canon, you're going to hear about it.
Oh yeah,
you're going to hear about it. And if there's something you missed about Bolian culture or anything like that, you're thinking, okay, we think we've got it, there's just really not been anything, you'll find out. You'll find out real soon.
I deal with YouTube comments on a daily basis. Trust me, anytime I make any sort of factual error, I hear about it immediately 20 different times. So I'm very prepared.
Do you have any kind of projected release date on any of this?
I am hoping that we are going to start having sort of initially stuff to show, like scenes. I'm recording with the voice actors actually in the next couple of weeks. We're going to be starting to record some scenes. I am still casting, of course, for a few major characters, so I'm trying to get all of those ducks in a row. But yeah, I'm hoping that within the next 6 months, at the latest, you're going to see something, if not mostly completed, at least sort of in an advertisable state.
Okay. Well, I'm certainly looking forward to that. And as we get more of this news out there about that, I'm sure you're going to be building some good hype for it, because this is something to get excited for. I really think it is. And I certainly hope that the whole thing just comes together for you. And as we wrap up here, just want to ask you, could you tell our audience where they can find your social media information, just your websites, your whatever it is that you want to talk about?
Nope, no problem. Absolutely. I'm putting together, I have a Facebook page right now, Star Trek Tigris fan production. So you can go there. There's not a whole lot there yet, but as I go, I'm going to be adding more updates, information, pictures. There's some light concept art there right now. I am also available on YouTube at That's a Space Station. That's my primary personal YouTube channel where I update with video essays, reviews, random thoughts I have about movies and stuff. And of course, you can always find me both on ScreenRant.com as well as the Screen Rant YouTube channel.
I like that. This is a space station.
That's a space station.
That's no moon.
It started out as a misquote of "It's a space station" from Star Wars, but it's sort of just stuck. And that's a space station on YouTube.
Chris, thank you very much for taking out the time to sit and talk with me about this. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad that we had the opportunity to do this recording, do this interview, so that we could learn more about this project. So I really appreciate it. And for those of you that are listening or watching, thank you for sitting in on Beyond Trek Podcast. I want to remind you to go boldly where none have gone before. I always mess up the word boldly for some reason.
We are Beyond Trek Podcast. Lower your inhibitions and surrender your ears. We will add inspirational and hilarious Trek content to your day. Your attention will adapt to subscribe to us. Resistance is futile.
If you enjoyed this podcast, you can support us at patreon.com/BeyondTrek.